We are Kat and Nat, and we're here today with Sonia Nijjar. And why don't you tell us what you do?
Sure. Very nice to be here. Thanks for having me. So I am a lawyer in Toronto at Neinstein, and I have a split practice between medical negligence work, which is how I started my career, and I continue to practice today. And then I also do some mass torts work, most notably leading or helping lead one of the biggest litigations right now against Meta, TikTok, Snapchat on behalf of school boards.
When you say mass tort, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Can you tell me?
Yeah, sure. So mass tort essentially just means that we are suing for the same thing on behalf of many different plaintiffs. So we act on behalf of over 20 now school boards across Ontario against these social media companies. They're all claiming the same thing has happened, but they have their own claims. So it's not a class action, which you often hear about. It's a legal term, but it means similar.
So you wear a lot of hats is what you do? It sounds like you do in terms of the legal system and playing a role in creating more equitable outcomes for patients in your malpractice suit. Yeah. What does that mean for people who are trying to understand this at home, or the common person who's walking down the street?
Yeah. So maybe I'll explain what medical malpractice is.
Yeah, I think that's helpful.
So we act on behalf of plaintiffs, which means the people who are injured as a result of harm that happens in the medical system. So whether that's something bad that happens in the hospital while you're hospitalized, you were injured because of a mistake by your family doctor, however that sort of manifests, we act on behalf of the injured party. So the simplest way to say is we sue doctors, hospitals, and healthcare systems. What we've noticed is that healthcare outcomes are bad outcomes are disproportionately being experienced by people who are from minority backgrounds. And so there's support actually in the medical literature, patient safety literature about this. We know, and you've probably heard the term, the social determinants of healthcare, meaning that there are non-medical factors for why things happen, right? And part of that is race, gender, of course, ethnicity, socioeconomic status. And these are all factors that we on kind of the other side, which is the legal side, are recognizing are contributing to negligence, right? We don't sue just because something bad has happened. That's not necessarily negligence. But when there is negligence, that's when we come into play to advocate for the rights of these injured people and their families often. So a lot of my work historically has been obstetrical negligence cases where, unfortunately, a very bad outcome has impacted a young baby who, never had a chance to experience a different life. And so as mothers, as a mother, I know, like the effect of that on parents, on the mother, on the extended families is so significant. And when you kind of peel the onion a little bit and see how the people experiencing those bad outcomes often do come from minority backgrounds, racialized backgrounds, immigrants, people who don't speak English as their first language. It really is eye-opening, and I take that really seriously in my legal work. That is something you have to take notice of, and it is relevant. It's relevant to what we do.
Random, but as a public system, do you sue the system, or how does that work?
It's a very good question. It's a very good question because it is something that I think the public doesn't understand. Physicians in Canada are not considered employees of the hospital or employees generally. So they are independent contractors that are protected by an organization called the CMPA, which you may have heard of. It's the Canadian Medical Protective Association. And so when we sue, like let's say it's an obstetrical negligence case and the physician is involved, you think there was negligence on part of the physician, but you also think that there was nursing involvement, hospital involvement, which often there is. We sue both the doctors who are represented by the CMPA, and then we sue the hospital who is responsible for their staff, which include nurses. And so at the end of the day, the hospital's insurance, they're better at explaining that they are kind of like a traditional insurance company, but really it's publicly funded dollars, right? It's because our system is fully publicly funded. And then the CMPA is funded through the premiums that physicians pay for their protection. But what people don't understand is that those premiums are heavily subsidized by our provincial governments. And so in upwards of 80%, depending on the year, is public. It's public money. And so really it's just public purses, depending on how you look at it, just kind of shuffling around money.
I don't think a lot of people knew you could sue like I didn't think that they knew you could. Even.
Well, I think there's two narratives about it. I think one is it's really hard to if you do.
Unless you hire you.
Well, I mean, listen, I think we do what we do very well. We're a very small bar. So there's very few of us across the country who like exclusively devote our practice to this area. So my firm is one of them. There's a handful in Toronto. You know, we have really good relationships with our colleagues who do this work just because it is so small. And partly it's because it is very difficult. You know, it's a very difficult system because it's a public healthcare system, because you are dealing with, you know, essentially public funds, but it's a really important one.
It is.
And it gives voice to really some of the most vulnerable people.
Yes.
So, Sonia, from your perspective as both a lawyer and a hospital ethics board member, where do you see the biggest gaps in access to justice or care for marginalized patients?
I'm going to scale it back a little bit and just sort of explain how the healthcare system works.
Okay, thank you.
So there's two ends of a healthcare system, okay? There's the blunt end and there's the sharp end. The sharp end is where a patient experiences care. So where a physician, nurse, healthcare practitioner is actually delivering care, right? You have your assessments, you go to an emergency room, you're in triage, whatever. The blunt end of the system is the system that makes up for that care. So resourcing, policy decisions, literally infrastructure.
Access,
exactly. And so rural access versus urban access is a huge thing. We don't like to think that those of us who have to experience or who experience care in community-based hospitals, meaning smaller centers, receive different care, but they do, right? And it's not because those doctors are better, worse, whatever. It's because the blunt end of the system is different. You have different resources. You have different policy decisions being made. Right from the beginning, when you kind of do like a bird's eye view of this, is you have to recognize that every system looks different. And so that's where you start thinking like, okay, you know, where do some of these discrepancies start off from? One of the things that I always say, and I say to students, I say whenever I speak about these issues, which I often do and write about them, is that cultural competence is competence, right?
Yeah.
We must learn to become culturally competent. That doesn't mean necessarily like you know everything about your particular patient's background, history, ethnicity, whatever. We tell people stories, right? That's actually what I do as a lawyer. I am a storyteller, and then I apply the facts to the law. That's what I do. Healthcare practitioners do the same thing, but with health, right? They got to learn the story of the patient. So like when a patient comes in complaining about pain, and a patient with brown skin's pain is considered different than a patient with white skin pain. Like those are things that matter. That will affect how, you know, healthcare is delivered. And so that's often something that we're seeing is just like not being trusted, right? So racialized communities, new immigrants, those of us for whom English was not a first language, just experiencing that differently. So not being believed, right?
Yeah.
Or tolerance of pain being different. Things like that are happening all the time. They happen every day. Anybody who works in the system will tell you that they happen. But when we realize that adverse events, bad events, right? Things that were not supposed to happening are happening at a rate of almost like 8% of all hospital admissions result in a bad outcome, which is something that Canadian public doesn't know. It's a very, actually now well-researched stat. And out of that 8%, disproportionately being experienced by marginalized communities.
Wow.
This is a real problem. It's a real problem.
Do you think the spotlight on women's disproportionate, kind of the gap, there's like a medical gap, will help all the kids, like across the board, China spotlight? Or do you think we need to do it in steps?
Each of the communities?
Yeah, I like, because I'm seeing a huge uptick in women being like, hold on, we're missing a whole bunch of research and data and, on women. Is this going to help everyone's cause.
I think it will. I think that we are a little bit behind in Canada on the research. We're only really now starting to gather some of this like anecdotal experience and then having it, become a little bit more rigorous in terms of review.
Why are we behind?
It's a good question. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know. I think there's a number of reasons. I think we are a public healthcare system. And so, there's lots of demands, lots of competing demands. And I think that's part of it and maybe the start of it. But generally speaking, I would say that we are, we're talking about the social media case earlier. And I think even there, the research on the harms of social media we're very behind on. All the more important that we're doing this work, we're having these conversations, you guys are shedding light on these really important topics. Obviously from a legal perspective, that's kind of been our ethos, is like, let's look at society's problems and let's figure out how the law fits in. How can we help, start like really hammering away at some of these issues? And so it's all part of the same thing, but it's just so important. It's just so important to realize that, when you have these like legal problems that you hear of, they're not just isolated incidents. Right? There really are. They're systemic.
If it's happened to one, it's happened to
exactly.
It's sort of like you're an advocate and also a lawyer at the same time, because a lot of what you're doing is advocating for populations and genders that don't have the same access. How are you applying that across the board? Like, do you feel like you're advocating because you have to you probably have to teach a lot of people what you're doing and why it is a problem? Because people, if they're not hearing the 8% or they're not hearing, are we doing anything about it in the hospitals, even though we know these stats, or does it take lawsuits to change it?
The law plays a role. Okay, I think the law is a change-making tool, but it's not a panacea. It's not the only thing that is going to make change. We talk a lot about these issues in different contexts. So we're really involved in the medical legal community. We speak at conferences all the time. We're writing about these issues a lot. We do whatever we can to sort of raise the issues in a context that's not just purely legal. I think the law is important. Obviously, I think that I've devoted my career to it. So I do think it is important. The medical system, rather, can work with the legal system. Right now, we're seeing this, I sort of call it the bifurcated system. So I say, like, the fact that we have to separately sue doctors and separately sue hospitals, and then there's always 10 lawyers in the room, like pointing fingers at each other, that's not helpful. No. Because what we do know about how these events happen, like these bad outcomes happen, is that it's almost never because of one thing. Right? It's exactly. We're not experiencing healthcare the way that we used to, which is like you used to be able to pick your doctor. You could like go to a hospital and be like, I want that person, right? And everything was very isolated. Now, because of increases in population, because the provinces have taken over since the 80s, we have team-based healthcare, and that's a good thing. Team-based healthcare, we know from research, is a good thing. It increases quality and it reduces, frankly, these types of errors. But the errors still do happen, and when they happen, you should be able to prove them from a legal perspective based on how they happen, which is team-based, right? It's collective failure. Our current system doesn't really let us do that because we have to point fingers individually. And so the conversations that are happening inside the context of these lawsuits are often not reflective of what actually happened. Yeah. And that's a problem. So we've done some advocacy on trying to figure out how to change that and move to what we call like an enterprise model liability, which is where the hospital, like the institution that is, governing everything should be principally responsible. Right. Yeah. And it like makes
it's like the principal. Sense. It's like you're the principal. Exactly. You're responsible for everyone underneath the roof.
Exactly. There's lots of resistance to this idea. And I'm not sure where we're going to get with it. But I think having the conversations is really important and pointing out like, hey, guys, the legal system has the capacity to help. Like we know a lot about how these errors happen because we are the ones who hear the stories.
I was going to say, because you don't want this to happen. You don't want to be doing it. You want things to change.
No, I can find another way to make a living. I'll be fine. We want quality, we want less adverse events, and we want safer patient care. That's what we want.
And to be clear, there is actual things that can go wrong that doctors hadn't made a mistake. It just is human life that happens. Like, you're not looking to go find problems.
No.
It is something where you're seeing
Where
if it
there's
actually,
negligence.
yeah, where there actually is negligence.
Yes.
Because I think some people don't even understand that part in the Canadian system, because we've all just kind of been like, oh, well, and been like, that's how it is here, rather than trying to understand what actually happened when there is something that goes really seriously wrong that shouldn't have.
It's not that something bad happened. It's that the practitioner breached the standard of care.
Right.
And what people don't realize about this area of law is that we need expert evidence to be able to establish that. It's not just a bunch of lawyers going rogue and being like, you did it. We get experts. We get experts. We prove all of this through expert evidence. And that's the check and balance in the system. So this idea that like everyone's litigating for everything, first of all, it's not really an idea in Canada. But it is like this narrative that people have, right? Yeah. It's just not true, because you can't. There's check and balances in the system.
And it hopefully makes the system better as a whole.
Totally.
Because it holds people accountable. Like you said, checks and balances. You have been a strong mentor to young lawyers. Why is mentorship particularly important for underrepresented voices in the legal profession?
One thing I always say about this profession is that at the end of the day, we are a service-oriented profession, right? It's about client service. We represent the people. If we represent the people, then we should have representatives who look like the people. Yeah. It's important. We represent different voices. We live in a beautiful country that is multicultural, that has different views and perspectives. And the lawyer that you hire should have the ability to understand that. That doesn't mean they have to look like you. That means that they've undertaken a responsibility to understand your voice. We've done a lot here. We've done like trauma-informed lawyering courses. We've become certified as trauma-informed lawyers. We do a lot of, EDI work. And not only because we think it's important professionally, but literally to provide this service to our clients, many of whom, and I can just tell you anecdotally, if you were to look in my cabinet, I would say over 80% of the people who have experienced medical harm and come to me are marginalized, right? You want advocates who can understand and take the responsibility.
And validate, right? Because they've already been through something. So to have to re-explain what you are, who you are, and why it was, an experience, you don't need someone just to be like, wow, to dismiss you again. You need someone who can, fight for you and you believe them.
Yeah, and you believe them. And I think that's a really good point. The other reason I think it's so important to be a mentor and to have these conversations with particularly young women is there is an idea that women need to like fit a mold, right? And you guys talk about this a lot, and I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but like it's not that you have to go and try to find a space that fits. It's that because of who you are, there is something and somewhere that needs you because of who you are.
Yeah.
We chaired the like a women in law summit. It was like a Canada-wide women in law summit a few years ago. And we did this presentation, and it was in the middle of the pandemic. It was so interesting. We did this presentation about why female leadership is so important, right? And it's like cliche, of course it's important, but like why? Like what are the things about female leadership that are unique, that are important? And what we found is that the qualities that are often dismissed and we try to silence about women, so like we're empathetic, right? Like we understand relational dynamics differently. Often we're told like tone it down, like tone it down, like be a boss, whatever. Those are actually the qualities that the world needs, right?
Like make you the best lawyer. It actually makes you the best lawyer because you can understand people. You can
absolutely
and relate to them in a different way because we're constantly having to shift who we are, what we are, and where we fit.
Yeah, and those are often the qualities that in moments of crisis are the most important. And so we know it because 2008 recession, the only banks that didn't fail were led by women, okay? So COVID, the countries that fared the best, led by women. Like, these are really...
I remember hearing that.
Yeah. We need women.
We need women. We need women. Like,
why do women not,
leadership.
do you think, feel like they fit? Do they feel like they are intimidated? They don't fit here? Like, what is it, do you think?
I think the law is a very archaic institution. We have these ideas and narratives about like the advocate in court, like the Perry Masons, right? And women, and particularly racialized women or women of marginalized communities, don't feel like that is them.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like you haven't seen yourself in those spaces. That's one thing. And then it's like the qualities that you think you need to have to be a strong litigator, a strong advocate are not the qualities that you yourself think you either possess or are your strengths. And so that would be probably why we don't have that level of discourse that we need to. But what is interesting, so I went to law school in 2011. When did I go to law school? 2011. Already by then, the class was half women.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
Yeah. And what I've learned recently from the new cohort is that it's actually more women than men.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, we're getting somewhere.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's
I
when
want to know if you love or hate the Reese Witherspoon movie. What was it? Where she becomes a lawyer, she goes to
Legally Blonde.
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you love that or hate that?
Yeah.
Like, did it do anything for women, do you think? Or was it a terrible representation?
No, I love that movie.
You love that movie. Okay.
I feel like the memory, like I don't
It's
remember
fun.
the details and probably the things that wouldn't pass today, but the memory of her being smart and working hard is what
she was not smart, but she found out she was smart. And
She figured it out.
Yeah, she figured it out. I was like,
well, I think also in that movie, she was told she wasn't smart.
Right. Yeah.
She was, yes. And then
Yeah.
she figured it out based on all being clever as a woman.
Yeah, I feel like so much of what you just said, I feel like so many young women to hear that when you're talking about the characteristics that a woman has and how those can be leadership traits.
Yeah.
But again, often it's like, don't show that side.
Yeah.
It feels so inspirational for women. But when you say the law is, you feel it's archaic, you really do. When you think about a lot of lawyers, I'm a lawyer, and you see this on TV, you don't get that sort of like your passion for change, for things that are going to be like good for the world, our country, our community. I wouldn't have thought when I thought about a lawyer what I would have taken from you today.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't see it that way.
Yeah.
And when my daughter says she wants to be a lawyer, everyone's like, oh, don't do that. And I'm
Yeah.
like, don't ever tell anyone that. But it's an interesting,
But also, if she wants to be a lawyer because she not just, because it's a good job, maybe you can make a lot of money, but because she can make change in things that matter to her, and then to go into a law that is means something to you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's huge. I mean, not just for career satisfaction, right? It's just like a lot of us went to law school for exactly the reasons that we're talking about today, but don't have opportunities to actually manifest that once you get out of law school. You have a lot of debt, as I understand. Law school tuitions have gone up so much so that like it's a lot of debt. It's a lot of debt.
a lot of time.
A lot of time. And like people are at different places in their life. And so sometimes you can't, right? And you can't. And I think there is this idea that like, there's only certain ways that you can make a lot of money. And that's obviously not true either. But I think we're very lucky. And all of us here at this firm, at least, we are very cognizant of our privilege to be able to make change. It is a privilege, no doubt about it, but it's also like the reason that we all did this. And it is very lucky that we get to make a living at it.
You're so inspiring.
I know. I was just immediately like, find the boys.
Go to law school.
Find the boys to listen to. But this interview to share with our daughters, to get locked in and listening to what Sonia's saying, is like.
Yeah,
I really appreciate that.
It is a very different perspective, and it's like it's so refreshing to hear, and actually so educating.
Yeah, and inspiring.
Yeah,
I'm really glad. Thank you so much.
Thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.